everyone. I hope your day is going super well. As always, we're very honored and privileged when you take some time to spend it with GoldSpring. And what we're bringing you today, we think is a new and a bit of a different way. In our time in the industry, we talk a lot about what we do with booking tools and how they connect, and we value them. But what we don't probably do is clean them, dust them up, and get them in the right space to be as modernized, as technologically forward as we possibly can while we integrate with our TMCs for fulfillment and so on. So that's what we've put together, and I couldn't be more delighted to have Harry and Julie. But before we introduce ourselves, just very quickly, let's go through the agenda and just walk you through kind of where we're going to be. First, we just want to talk about the bigger picture of why does OBT matter and how does it fit in to the larger perspective of a well-run managed travel program. Then the why do this, and then what do we finally see when we get into those. We'd like to walk you through a case study that we recently completed for a customer. We then like to show you the value that the customer achieved from that and what they saw. Want to share a little bit of our methodology and then wrap it up with what's next. So thank you very much. And if we could, Harry, would you start with your introduction, Julie, and then I'll come back and take us forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Will. I'm Harry Hoffman. I've been in the corporate travel industry for about 20 years. Most of that time has been on the TMC side, but I do have a couple of years under my belt as a travel buyer. My background is really varied, and a lot of it is travel technology and data and reporting, as well as overall program management.
Hello all, Julie Foster. I've spent my career working across both the supplier and client sides of the travel industry and operations and travel technology. For the last few years, I've focused on optimizing travel technology ecosystems, fine-tuning booking tools, working through GDS and content challenges, large implementations, and resolving integration issues. I've really enjoyed digging into the details to troubleshoot these problems, simplify processes, and find practical solutions that improve the experience for travelers and travel program managers.
Thank you, Julie. Let's go ahead and move forward. And our audience always appreciates the fact that rather than stuck with me at the B team, we've got the A team here with Harry and Julie. So couldn't be more excited to share all of this with you. We want to just start with the strategic drivers. And if you've been on our other webinars, you've seen us talk about this. These are the 6 most common answers to the question, why do we manage travel? And the reason we continue to present these to GoldSpring webinars and our clients, they resonate with our clients, is this has so many add-on benefits that can connect more deeply into how you get budget for your programs, how you create the interest and demand from senior management, and how you build up the reputation and integrity of the program. So when some C-level says, why do we manage travel? Why don't we just let everyone go do what they do, find it on their websites that they'd like to search? Well, usually these are the 6. Cost management makes some sense, right? We typically put travel policies in because that's an accepted spend level. And so therefore we want our tools, including OBT and all the rest of it, to dovetail nicely into that. But at the same time, there may be a sustainability kind of metric. And so you might need to preference more sustainable options, either LEED certified buildings or less carbon footprint flights or trains as opposed to driving or some other way. So there may be a sustainability component. Now that may not be true for everyone, but many organizations have stepped into that as being one of the reasons we manage travel. We want to make our footprint a little different. Third might be regulatory compliance. So you may be a government contractor and you have prescriptive reporting that you must do to get paid. You could also be a pharma that has sunshine laws. You could also be trying to adhere to global data standards and protections. You may have legal concerns. So as you look through that, being able to understand travel, where we spend it and report on it could be a regulatory compliance issue. The fourth is traveler satisfaction. Very few of our customers say, GoldSpring, I don't really care about the traveler, just get me the lowest cost. Often there is some element of let's do the right thing for our people. As we know, it's difficult to hire good people. And so we do have this little bit of a war for talent. And sometimes those talented people are heavy travelers. They might be the sales or the marketing teams. And because of that, if they're looking at competitive offers, they might pick a more friendly traveler type of policy. So important that we make the booking experience and how we handle disruptions and payment and reconciliation, all of that usually lays into the reason we manage travel. The last two, duty of care, again, 9/11 kind of kicked us off here, and then with ash clouds and all kinds of economic unrest and terrorism and just natural disasters, we tend to say we want to look after our employees while they're traveling for us. So we have a standard we want to apply. And lastly, you don't want to do this inefficiently. So all of these have a balance to them. So if you can imagine a little bit of a teeter-totter, let's say you want to drive into cost management a little deeper. Well, that's great. You might put in something like 4 levels of pre-trip approval. Well, that's probably going to drop traveler satisfaction, probably going to drop process efficiency, but may raise cost containment. So I just wanted to make the point that these do play off of each other. And so one of the things that we've been doing for a while is a strategic driver survey with C-level participants. And the idea is to ask the C-level, where do they support these? We would encourage each of you to do that as well, because let's just say that they lean into sustainability and you have a new technology that you could bring forward, but it's going to cost $10,000 a year. Well, once C-suite says this is an important reason, you have a higher likelihood of getting that budget approved because you've already connected that dot. So hopefully that makes some sense. And that's why we start with strategic drivers. And as Harry and Julie go through the deck, they will share with you how each of these steps connects into these different drivers. So thanks. Let's move forward. We do have a poll, and Melissa's going to put up the poll. How long have you been on your existing OBT? Clearly, 3+ years wins the day, right? That's 74% of everyone, and just a few that have done less than a year. So many of you have been with your OBT for 3+ years, indicating that there may be time to look at a few different approaches, and that's where we're going to step into now. So could we progress the slide? At this point, I really want to pass it over to Harry to take us forward, and then he and Julie will come back together, and then we'll wrap up as a team. So Harry, take it away.
Great, thanks, Will. So why do we want to look at it, doing an online booking tool audit? So what a lot of people, one analogy I always use is that a travel program is very much like a house. So it's, strong data acts as a foundation, and it supports all the decisions that you make as a travel manager. Duty of care is there to protect you. So it's sort of like a roof. Policy that stands firm and holds up the program or kind of like the walls of a building. And then the OBT, if you really think about it, it's very much the door to your program. So it's very first thing that travelers see and that they know about the program. It's really how they identify with it. It makes first impression for candidates and new hires. It has locks for compliance, so that's the policy and the rules and things that you put forth to make sure that that travelers are compliant with policy. And then it also has a framework for your travelers to work within. So that's really, when you think about it, your suppliers and really the what you've sourced for them for the travel program. Also, like a door, sometimes it has gaps that can allow bad habits or less than best practices to flow through.
And now you have an established OBT. Now, what questions should you be asking? We think that here, the list of questions that we have here are questions that you should ask about your current online booking tool in the audit process or before the audit process. How is your policy alignment and compliance? How is the traveler experience? Are you hearing noise? What are they complaining about? Is your content optimized to align with your program and your preferred suppliers? Are you just policing your travelers? Does the booking process feel punitive to them, or are they guided to stay in policy without really noticing? Does your data and reporting make sense? We think before you jump to another tool, it's always good to check your current tool and make sure it's optimized for your needs. If you're exploring other options, an OBT audit will give you the opportunity to compare the best version of what you have currently to the other options that are out there. And I think we have time for another poll at this point. What do you hear the most noise about your OBT? What are your travelers complaining about the most? Is it speed and performance, missing content, poor search results, site errors, policy issues and inconveniences? What are you hearing from them? Let us know. Missing content. That's a big one for you all. It seems to be the most, with poor search results right behind it. That aligns with a lot of what we've seen in the past, definitely. And speed is always a complaint. All right, thank you all.
Yeah, and so, I think some of you had mentioned in the chat, can we pick more than one? Well, that's very much par for the course. I think we've all seen latency issues. We've all seen search issues. We ask for one thing, and we, it seems like we have to go through hoops and ladders to try to get what we're actually looking for. Or sometimes, things just take forever, and it seems to almost like you'd rather be at the dentist than searching for travel. So I think we can all relate to this comic. So what are the common challenges that we see during an OBT audit? So systems are often set and forget during implementation. So oftentimes what will happen is either one supplier will implement an OBT for you, and then years will go by before anybody really takes a deep dive under the hood. So things will get dated, whether it's policy changes, supplier changes, changes in overall company direction or strategy. A lot of times those don't get factored in when you just set it and forget it. Also, TMCs and other suppliers, they tend to prioritize maintenance and support of the online booking tool rather than looking at a full-scale strategic overhaul to make sure that it's fresh and it's kept up to date with the program. System latency issues. So we've all seen it before, where things will bog down the system during the search and it'll seem to take forever. A lot of times that's caused by contradictions in programming from past adjustments that can cause poor performance. So for example, you might have one parameter set in the default programming in the background, and then you might add other programming that really contradicts it. And when that happens, it takes the system either longer to pull up the results, or it will even cause errors because the system doesn't know what to do. Discounts are added and re-added annually rather than changing existing ones. So when you have, when you start a program and you have 50 hotels, and then the next year you add another 50 hotels, and then you add another 50 hotels the following year. Now all of a sudden you went from an OBT that's looking at 50 hotels to 150 hotels. That's going to cause a lot of issues with your search results. And then also, settings adjusted to cure ills that can bog down the search results rather than help. So my favorite analogy here is, a lot of times people will say, oh, I can't find this airline or this flight. Let's expand the search results. Well, what you have to keep in mind is it's like fishing. If you use a fishing net, you're only going to catch so much fish. The net has a limit. If you throw out a bigger net, well, guess what? It still has a limit to how much that bigger net can hold. You're not going to catch every fish in the ocean. The way that needs to be looked at strategically is really you have to use the right bait to catch the right fish. So if you're looking for a specific flight, you need to make sure that your search parameters and the way that things are programmed are there to bring up, really kind of maximize the results. And then also, making sure that you're coaching travelers on how to perform their searches so that they get the best results themselves. Also, we see content challenges. So again, the search parameters have a big impact there. A lot of times content is set up in the rules as show, but as blocked instead of show but do not allow. When you block content, that actually creates more noise and problems than benefits. You might not want somebody to book that, but if they don't see it on your site, but they see it on one of the commercial sites, they're going to think that the tool is either broken, hiding, or that you're hiding something. So It's always better to be more transparent with the program and do show but do not allow in those kinds of situations. And then also, a lot of times there will be features that aren't turned on, and those will create content issues. So whether it's certain NDC settings, or direct connects, or travel fusion and the like, it's always best to make sure that you've got the latest functionality turned on, so that you're getting a complete view of all of the content. Some additional challenges that are faced: policy no longer accomplishes the intent. So you might have programmed it one way with the hope of having a certain result, or kind of guiding travelers down a certain path with your policy. However, sometimes it doesn't quite work that way. And so if it's not working as intended, what's always best is take a look at it, really get under the hood, and try to give it a tune up and figure out how you can tweak those to better accomplish those results. Also, tweaks and band-aids are all, oftentimes put in. So if something is broke or something is not quite the way that somebody would expect, they will tweak the rules or the policy to be broader to allow that content, when really all you're doing is kind of opening Pandora's box by allowing things that you might not really want them to see. So it's always good to look at the program holistically there. Approval processes can sometimes cause more work and frustration. So we've all seen it before, where the sheer number of approvals will kind of wear out approvers, and it'll lead to a rubber stamp situation. So we never want to see that. Processes no longer empower better decision making. So really the best practice is make sure that you're guiding travelers to pick the better decision on their own, rather than kind of blocking them in or fencing them in. And then approvers might not be close enough to the traveler, or to what their function is on a work scale, to really understand the business need. So that's another thing that should always be looked at, is how are you doing your approval policy, and who is doing the approving. And then overly complex approval processes can create frustration for travelers and approvers alike. So like Will had mentioned, if you've got an approval process out there that's got 2 or 4 approvers, that's really going to create some issues, especially if ticketing is required in 24 hours. So if things are missed and it requires all 4, then you're really setting yourself up for failure. New features. So one of the common challenges is making sure that your tool is up to date with the latest features and releases. So making sure that you've got you're up to date and familiar with the enhancements, making sure that those new features are turned on that can provide a better experience. So that's not just things that are native within a tool themselves. This could also be third-party platforms that work with the tool. So GroupWise is a classic example. Or if you have a taxation and immigration issue, like Will had mentioned in the first slide, and that's a focus, well, guess what? There are plugins to OBTs that will help you with that taxation and immigration. So it's all about working smarter, not harder. And those third-party platforms can definitely provide a better user experience, as well as a better experience managing the program. And lastly, it's the messaging and communication. So we've all seen it before, where you try to have messages and pop-ups on your OBT, and it ends up looking like the internet circa 1996. So it's always good to make sure that you limit your messaging and pop-ups to be more strategic and less distracting and confusing. And then also it's important to make sure that those messages are kept up to date. So why don't buyers conduct site audits more often? So oftentimes we've seen it's competing priorities. So audits often lose out to other urgent operational tasks or requests from executives. Time investment, oftentimes, it's only 1 or 2 people working on a travel program. So it's hard to find not only the time, but the resources to be able to do that. Sometimes there's fear of internal disruption. Audits might uncover some uncomfortable truth. Do you have a huge gap that you don't really want to call out? Sometimes it's limited access or authority. You might not have all the permissions that you need to do a thorough audit within the online booking tool. There's a lack of audit expertise. So, oftentimes it's kind of it's the technical understanding of the big picture of the online booking tool, really how all of the different pieces work in concert together. The other important thing is, an audit should be done by somebody that has an unbiased perspective. So, whether that's something, no bias towards certain suppliers or commissions or anything like that. Or also, there's that classic, well, why do you do it? Well, that's because it's the way it's always been. So to get outside of that trap, it's always good to have that unbiased perspective. And then sometimes it's always the path to, it's easier to follow the path of least resistance. So Band-Aid repairs oftentimes feel easier than a full audit, but really they're not looking at the big picture. And then lastly, concerns and stakeholder pushback. Nobody wants to, challenge the status quo. And we've got another poll real quick. So have you ever conducted a comprehensive audit of your online booking tool yourself? Or have you hired your TMC or any other source to conduct that audit? Perfect. So it's pretty evenly split. So about 51% of you have conducted an audit, either through your suppliers or through yourself, and 49% have not. So that's really good to see. It's positive to see that people are thinking about this actively. So, quick little, another cartoon I wanted to share real quick, something I think that we can all agree on is, sometimes the struggle is real. We really want to find, one thing specifically that we're looking for. And sometimes, we get 100 different things that are the complete opposite of what we're looking for. So, obviously that creates a lot of frustration and sometimes feels like we're going up against a gladiator. So. And then we've got a case study that we did. Julie, do you want to discuss the study?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. As an example of kind of this audit in practice, we have this case study that we'll share from a recent GoldSpring client. The challenge for them was that they were experiencing booking inefficiencies and user frustration in general. Their system was really slow to respond. The options returned in their search results were not logical a lot of the time. Sometimes, it was offering connecting flights when nonstops were preferred, in policy, and available. This was sometimes viewed as missing content, but it was really an issue with the configuration and how the results were being sorted when they came back. The travelers were complaining and going outside of the system to book travel, so they had a pretty low adoption rate at that point. A few of the key steps taken during this audit were reviewing and documenting the current policy and system settings that were in place, as well as testing the booking flow for each of the policy groups, not just the main one, but each different traveler type that they had policies for. In the process, we identified several configuration issues. Those were obviously impacting the speed and the relevance of the search results that were coming back. So we were able to pinpoint multiple improvement and optimization opportunities in this case pretty quickly just by going through those initial steps of the audit. And then, as a result, after we implemented the recommendations from the audit, they noticed faster response times almost immediately. The search results were more accurate and relevant, so that reduced that noise from the travelers of not being able to find what they were looking for when they were searching, especially for flights. They had increased booking compliance and user satisfaction. Like I said, the noise was reduced because they were finding what they needed when they were searching. And the security risks were reduced for them through better admin control and tracking. We found that a lot of people had admin rights that were either no longer with the company or had changed departments or just didn't need that access anymore. So that really was a security risk that was unknown at the time. But at the end of it all, they had their optimal configuration for their current tool. Their existing tool that they were very unhappy with was performing a lot better. And at this point, everything was documented and a tracking mechanism was set up so that they could track all the changes moving forward And then they could also schedule checkups moving forward, like an annual review, just to make sure everything was still on track. And again, even, if they kept exploring other online booking tool options, at least they had the optimized version of their existing tool to compare with those other options that they were looking at to give a more accurate picture of what was out there.
So really, this kind of brings up the next question. So what is the value gained through the audit? So oftentimes, as Julie found in her case study, optimized performance. So it's not just about the tool working faster, it's also working more efficiently, saving time and effort and energy. It increased traveler confidence and experience. So travelers were more confident about the content that was appearing. Their experience was a lot better, because the process was smoother. And also, we found savings was driven by empowering better decision making, increasing value for spend, making sure that you're promoting the right content. So it's not just about having all the content there. It's not about like collecting pogs. He with the most wins. It's really about making sure that you've got the right stuff there that for your travelers to pick from. And then ensuring that the right discounts are loaded. So, oftentimes when we go in there, what we'll find is, discounts that are, long gone with suppliers that are no longer part of the program, or, it may be seeing stuff from 2 or 3 contracts ago. Policy is better applied. So it's not just about, the policy the policy is there in writing, but is the programming really built to accomplish the goal and the need of the policy? And then, I think something that we can all agree with that is a benefit of this is making managing travel easier. So when people think about the online booking tool, a lot of the focus is on the traveler themselves and the booking experience. But what a lot of times gets overlooked is the actual managing of travel. When it's working right, it's there, to make life easier. It's another tool in our utility belt as superheroes, So it's about working smarter, not harder, and making sure that you've got all the right tools to help you manage that program. And then lastly, improve data and reporting. How often do we go in and into an online booking tool and there are, old reason codes, or there are questions that don't make sense, like trip purpose. How often have we all seen a trip purpose labeled as employee? An employee is a who, not a why. So it's always important to make sure that those things are always factored into that audit so that you can improve that data and reporting. And lastly, maximize efficiency. So it's all about working efficiently, quickly, making sure that the less clicks you have to do and the less hoops you have to jump through to get the results. Julie, do you want to talk about methodology?
Yep, we'll dive into that a little bit on the how and how we, move through this process of the OBT audit and the methodology behind it. Our process, it encompasses the entire travel technology ecosystem and the end-to-end booking process, the big picture. We take that big picture view, starting with several specific areas in the OBT to assess their dependencies and their impact on the overall experience. It's beneficial to have someone familiar with the various technologies that are working together in the background, such as the GDS and the different content sources, so that you can identify the root cause of issues and also identify opportunities for improvement, as well as optimize your configuration. We begin with a review of the existing configuration, any documentation that you have with that, maybe even from the original implementation of the settings, and then a survey and a discovery meeting to establish kind of a current state baseline and identify any known challenges and priorities up front that we want to look at before we do anything else. Next, we look at the travel policy and how that can be applied in the booking tool, as well as any approval processes that may be in place. We then audit the policy and rule settings for all of the areas in the configuration. This includes air, hotel, rental car, admin permissions, integrations, as well as the messaging that's presented throughout the booking process. We assess the tool's basic functionality, compliance with travel policies, and user experience. During this stage, we also log those known and potential issues that we spot during this process. We then provide a document with the current configuration, sort of a blueprint of your existing system. And we add to that our findings and then some actionable recommendations to go along with those. And then for additional considerations, kind of beyond the basic audit, because we've talked a lot about the OBT, but the OBT doesn't operate in a silo. We all know that. There are many components that need to be integrated and working together to optimize the technology and the overall program. An annual health check is recommended. If you've established this known baseline and you've tracked the changes, this should be a fairly easy process moving forward from that. That way you can ensure everything is still in its optimal state and kind of make sure that no changes have been made that you didn't know about and that may be causing conflicts within the process. Once your site is optimized, take a look at your data. Are you having problems with traveler profiles or some of your reporting? Is it accurate? Is it not accurate? And also, does your site align with your company's branding and tone? You know, does your site need a refresh? Do you provide clear and, you know, easily accessible policy direction and internal references for your travelers? To sum it up, this process is designed to uncover inefficiencies, identify your pain points, provide actionable recommendations that will help the tool work smarter and more in line with your program's goals.
Thanks, Julie. So, the big question is what's next? What are the next steps that we should really be taking to make sure that we're optimizing our OBT? So, first and foremost, define the goals and success criteria. So, what do we want to accomplish at the end of the day by doing this audit, and what will you consider make the project being successful? Determine when the last OBT review was. Have you ever had an OBT review? If not, when was it implemented and how long ago that was? And then, collect the existing documentation either from that review or from the implementation. It's good to review that to kind of get a baseline understanding of what should be there before you go in an audit, because often what we'll find is what was originally set up is very different from what currently exists because of all of the different tweaks that have gone on over the years. We want to make sure that we are applying the correct methodology, that we collect the work product, and then next we want to make sure that we ensure that stakeholder feedback and engagement is taken under consideration. So if there are any stakeholders in the program, whether it's somebody in higher up in procurement or finance, making sure that you're engaging with them before you do your audit. You want to make sure that you're creating that baseline there to measure changes, identify pain points and needs, and as well as collect empirical data for senior management to really give you that baseline before you go in. Next, you want to assign the work. You want to make sure that you're looking at the compliance, the functionality, and that you're documenting everything as you go. Lastly, you want to make sure that you implement changes. So, it's one thing to go through and find all of the warts and all in the program, but you need to make sure that you're implementing those changes that you want to apply, and that you're doing that in a organized fashion. You want to make sure that you're following up with the stakeholder feedback and engagement within 6 months. So it's always important to you set your baseline with your stakeholders ahead of time. Now that you've got some time under your belt under the updated program, redo those surveys, redo those those engagements with those stakeholders to make sure that you can measure accurately how things have changed. And then also, lastly, you want to make sure that you're reporting your successes.
Thank you, Harry. We have open Q&A, so if you heard something you'd like to hear a little bit more about, there's a Q&A tab on the Zoom, and it is open for anything you'd like to share with us. As you're giving that a little thought, just want to offer a couple of things. One, thank you very much, Harry and Julie, very insightful. And I appreciate the way you connected back to the strategic drivers. You see that, tweaking these kind of things can do an efficiency improvement, which is often one of the drivers. It could also improve the traveler satisfaction. It could also improve cost control, depending on how you configure and what you configure. As far as the reputation of the program, Harry mentioned, some organizations choose to suppress information that's presented, and others choose to present it. And Harry made the point that if you present it, then they know that the program has integrity. So now you're building a reputation, which is even beyond what we're doing here. And then very importantly, one of the highlights of the next steps is defining success so that we know the project was successful. So if I can, let me draw you a analogy. Just imagine a graph, and that graph has an arrow that says, what kind of improvements did we make? Did we make any technological improvements? And let's say we did. So all of a sudden the system is, let's say, 14% faster because we found some conflicting messaging. The next thing, you do the baseline survey before and after. Now travelers are 12% more satisfied than they were before because of the changes. And then the last piece might be related to what are the other stakeholders. We've implemented the sustainability presentation, or we've implemented something with regulatory compliance. So maybe that was a binary. It was not on, now it's on. You have 3 upward trending arrows to present as a result of this project. So understanding what we define as success and then being able to present it can really raise the stature of the program. And the last thing that I'd mentioned before we look at the questions is the typical US program might be 80% online initiated, and it might be 70 to 80% touchless, meaning no human fulfills that. So 80% starts online, and let's just say 80% finishes without a human. That means 64% of all those transactions are the front door of your program, the OBT, as we shared. So that's the way they view the travel program very, very often. And that might diminish in other countries and other regions, but it's an important front door. It's an important step that travelers do connect with. And to that end, at GoldSpring, we're seeing more and more of our customers challenge the status quo with some of the legacy providers and looking more at some of the new entrants. And we've got a couple of projects where we're evaluating those at the moment, and those are in process. So come back for the next webinar when we'll be able to share some of those learnings. And while I just go to the questions very quickly here, one is, do we find pre-trip approvals actually reduce trip cost or reduce the number of trips? Julie, Harry, any insight on that?
I would say that depends on the size of the program sometimes, and if it's set up in a streamlined fashion where it can be easily approved. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, I guess is the answer to that one. I would say in general, not much. It doesn't do a lot to help.
I would say it's, shouldn't really be looked at linear in terms of, does it yes or no. It really, it's a little more complicated than that. It's really how you manage it. If you've got a strict, travel approval system where almost every trip has to go through, for approval, then you're really watering down the effectiveness of that approval program. However, if you have something that's really well thought through, and you have the approvals going to the right people that are familiar with the reason for the trip, it can reduce the number of trips, and it can reduce the cost. But again, it's all in how you use the tool.
Our second question was, does supplier preferencing or deprioritizing actually shift share? or is that just wishful thinking? And I'll kick this off. It definitely shifts share. One of the more interesting changes that we've seen in the marketplace is the marketing aspect that we're now doing in our travel programs. So if you go back a few years, it was more command and control, right? We're the company, we tell you what to do, you ought to follow it, and if not, we'll report you as out of policy. But with the competitive landscape of the evolution of AI, some of the leisure tools, and some of the ways the market is responding, more and more buyers are integrating a sales persuasion approach into their OBTs. So not just creating the preferencing, but creating some really creative messaging that might connect in. So Harry, Julie, anything to add around that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, prioritizing, a certain supplier to come up first in your results, that will definitely have an impact because it's, top of site, top of mind. But, really what, again, if you take a holistic approach to managing travel, it's not just about how you prioritize it on the site. It's also about how you communicate and evangelize your program. So really making sure that travelers not only know what the policy is, you can always hand them the policy, but do you really want to make sure that they understand the methodology and the why behind the policy, really what we're trying to accomplish. If they have a better grasp of that, then they're going to be more compliant and more likely to follow what the path that you're trying to direct them towards.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, if the right path is also the path of least resistance, they're going to follow that, and they're not going to search, 10 pages deep for something they may have had in mind when they first came to the tool. They're probably going to choose, something that's offered on that first page.
Thank you. And then our third question is, do some OBTs seem to have higher client traveler satisfaction than others? And I'm going to answer this very carefully. At GoldSpring, we have a stakeholder engagement tool, and in that tool, we do OBT surveys for customers, and we do that. I think we have 140 countries in there, and I believe we have about 3 million ratings on OBTs, and some that even that don't exist anymore, right? Some that have been sunsetted. But what you tend to see is that a leisure style approach tends to resonate a little more with a younger demographic. And so what I mean by that is some of the legacy booking tools that have refreshed and they're really solid. They've been going for years, but because they've been around so long, they've trained the users to an acceptable level of satisfaction. Whereas a younger demographic might be more comparing and contrasting in a corporate booking tool to a leisure tool. And there's a lot more similarity in those sort of leisure initiated tools. And so, yes, we do see a bump in satisfaction, but I want to caution that by saying, and as a result of that, some of the functionality that more complex and mature programs need might not be available. We haven't called it out specifically, but one of the things that we all know is that just because a booking tool can do something doesn't mean the fulfillment TMC allows that to be turned on, because it can break in the back office. So what you tend to see is a new feature release that gets public, buyers get excited about it, and the TMC says, yeah, it breaks our back office, and you're going to have travelers stranded where they think they have a reservation and they don't. And that's obviously a lose-lose proposition. So you see a lot of caution related to how TMCs will turn on fulfillment of these products and services. So let me pause there. Julie, anything to add? And then Harry?
You said exactly what I was thinking. Is it's hard to tell, and I think that kind of goes back to what we talked about with optimizing what you have right now, so that you're really comparing apples to apples, and you're not just looking at a new and different tool thinking that all the features they have to offer are going to work for you and your program and your TMC. You just have to be really careful with making an accurate comparison.
I don't have anything necessarily to add to what you've already said, Will, but it did remind me of something that is very important to point out and keep in mind when conducting an audit. An OBT is really a GUI. It is really just a platform that sits on top of an existing ecosystem. And in many cases, it is, the TMC's ecosystem, whether it's the GDS, their mid-office, back office. So anytime that you do an audit, or really any kind of deep dive in the program, it's always good to have alignment with your suppliers, especially, with any big changes that you're making. If you're turning on functionality, you want to make sure that they can support that functionality. If you're trying to accomplish a certain path, by making adjustments to your OBT, you want to make sure that that also aligns with their capabilities and that your operations team is aligned with your MO. So I just want to.
Thank you, Harry. I'm going to hit these last two questions and then we'll bring it home. The first is, do you have an OBT audit template we could provide? We do have an OBT audit template, but that's proprietary. That's the work we do. So the intent of today's webinar was to share with you those key details so that you have an understanding of what you could do if you wanted to go to the market and look at that. The second, you could ask any of your suppliers that help administrate that for you, and they might be able to offer you something. And then we were asked specifically if we offer reviews for concur expense, and we do that as well. So thank you for that question. Just want to wrap up with this picture. If you've heard this story, you might appreciate it, and that is a professor is in front of his classroom and he pulls out a glass jar and he fills it with 3 really big rocks. And he asks the audience, hey, is the jar full? And the students say, yes, it is. And then he pours little pebbles that fill in around the big rocks. And he asks, is the jar full? And they say, yes. And then he pours sand over those pebbles and it fills in the gaps and asks the students, is it full? They say, yes. And then he pours water and says, is it full? Yes. So he pulls out a second jar and he does the exact opposite. He starts with water and says, is it full? Yes. Then he pours the sand in, and of course that knocks the water out. And then he pours the pebbles in, and then of course the big rocks won't go in. So the story that we've tried to present to you today is that OBT audits are a big rock strategy. It's so important because of the way your travelers relate and support the program that it's absolutely vital that you make sure you put in those big rocks of reviewing OBTs and all the tendencies and settings and configurations that are possible. With that, we want to thank you very much. For those of you that know, we have a masterclass series that we offer on Mondays. You can find it on our website. It's absolutely complimentary. And we're in airline. We'll be starting TMC, I think, in about a month. So thank you very much, everyone. Grateful for your attendance. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Bye now.